So, I've spent a lot of time on the channel recently talking about the problems that seeped into many of JJK's fights near the end of its run. From poor pacing, to a lack of emotional investment, to baffling writing decisions, I had my issues with the way that Gege handled that particular part of the story. But I don't believe that JJK's fight writing on the whole is all that bad. The series is centered around fights and spectacle, and while it had an iffy track record near the end, it usually handled those things well. See, the fights were never my biggest issue with JJK. No, that'd be its world building. Or to be more specific, Gege's utter refusal to add world building to their story at every opportunity. I'm not exaggerating here. How does the world of JJK even function? I understand how ninjas and villages work in Naruto. I know how pirates and the world government work in One Piece. I can describe how Soul Reapers and the Soul Society operate in Bleach. But when it comes to JJK, I'm constantly struggling with defining what Jujutsu Society even is. First off, exactly where is everyone? There are clans that are thousands of years old, but we only see 2 schools with 13 students total. We do see students or some other random sorcerers in JJK 0, but we don't ever see anything like this again. An entire school of Jujutsu for 6 students is silly. Why couldn't Gege just draw some extra random students in the background? If you were going to keep the student pool at such a small number, it would made a lot more sense if the Jujutsu schools were a weekend-only program for students, and most of the time it was a base for sorcerers to work out of. It makes sense with the whole hidden fantasy aspect of the series, and works for a supernatural protector type of story. And then there's Shibuya. That place should have been crawling with other sorcerers and curse users. Gojo's going to be sealed, and only about 3 curse users from the black market show up. At the very least, we should have seen more tertiary characters and small skirmishes in the background. We know that there are powerful characters beyond Jujutsu High and the big 3 clans, whether they're Jujutsu sorcerers or curse users. So where were they during the Culling Games and the Shinjuku Showdown? I understand that they wouldn't have been that relevant to the plot, but having them present, even if they aren't significant, can help with immersion and make the world feel more real. With such minimalist cast design, it's hard to grasp precisely how the world operates. There's like 20 sorcerers, even though there are seemingly thousands of curses. The numbers just don't work. And how many of those sorcerers weren't students or zenin? We needed more. Not just of the active duty sorcerers, but of nearly everything. Gege left the world building as bare bones as possible, writing just enough of it to facilitate the plot, and then ignoring it for the rest of the series' run. And that decision hurts the story so much. A key idea in the setting is the many failings of Jujutsu Society and how badly it hurts their most vulnerable groups. It's a nice idea, I just wish we could have seen more of it. Jujutsu Society sucks, but we never really learn why. It's supposedly because of old people in power. A generic, faceless group of conservative elites. The issue is that we don't know how they got into power in the first place, which is problematic because of how the world of JJK works. Connections and social standings don't mean all that much because of people like Gojo who can destroy armies casually. What even is traditional jujutsu? Exactly what makes modern techniques worse in the eyes of older individuals? From their golden age to modern times, sorcery has always favored a kind of hyper-individualism that makes it really hard for such a mindset to exist. I understand that powerful curse techniques are inherited by blood, and that would give the old families a lot of power, but there are clearly very powerful people born outside of these families. Like, say, every special grade not named Gojo in the story. So then, how do the higher-ups manage to remain in power while pissing off every single special grade in the story? I get it, they're supposed to be out of touch, but it feels like at least one special grade should have been on their side because people like Yuta, Yuki, and Gojo would wipe the floor with most sorcerers in minutes. So exactly how did the higher-ups build such political power without having any distinct or proper system to enforce it? Part of the reason they feel so unrealized is because they don't really do that much in the story. The narrative isn't centered around them, so while almost every character is affected by JJK's societal issues, it doesn't feel central to most characters. I can't talk enough about how we just don't see enough of the sorcerers. Without a sizable population, we can't truly grasp their culture, nor can we properly differentiate it from our own. And as a result, JJK's society feels a lot like a copy and paste of our own modern society's worst views and beliefs. And that's a sign of incredibly poor world building. For an example of world building and exploration done reasonably well, just examine Naruto. In Naruto, ninjas warp the entire culture of the world and societal expectations. We understand why ninja clans were formed and what makes their world go round. Ninjas are celebrity mercenaries that are tasked with handling missions and showing off their village's strength. The reason that villages even have chunin exams is not only to show off their power to other villages, but it's to advertise themselves to daimyos and the world's other elites so that people will invest money in their village. The culture of shinobi was built on decades of warfare and old ideas about honor and glory. The societal expectation of shinobi is to be emotionless killing machines, but the show goes out of its way to show that you can't repress someone's humanity, and that the cultural standard of ninjas was just hurting future generations over and over again. Naruto has to go on a journey to understand the history of his worlds and connect to others to try addressing the problems that have been destroying it. Sasuke is the ultimate symbol of the failings of the system, and saving Sasuke is the way through which Naruto proves his ideals can overcome the old ninja ways. Along his journey, we learn about some of the most notable clans throughout the world, their impact on the setting, and vice versa. The Uchiha, the Hyuga, the Senju, etc. In JJK, we get none of that. We literally don't know any of the Gojo members outside of Satoru. We don't know how the Gojo, Kamo, and Zenin clans even began. We don't know how other clans view each other. We barely even know what the traditional view of Jujutsu is. The higher-ups and the Zenin patriarchs are nothing more than mindless strongmen without logic or perspective. They only existed in the narrative to get killed by the good guys and believe in nothing besides the current shit status quo. Being a sorcerer is a terrible job. You will be fighting for the rest of your life, and you don't even get any fame or praise for it because you need to hide your existence. And anyone can gain cursed energy. It doesn't matter whether you're a boy or a girl, whether you're young or old, and yet Jujutsu society does nothing but reflect the worst parts of our own world's beliefs. Women being inferior to men, modern techniques being bad because we're old and hate young people, any attempt to change the status quo being bad. These are just real-world toxic problems pushed onto JJK, and not problems that would organically grow in Jujutsu society. I understand that the Naruto comparison isn't entirely one-to-one because JJK does take place in the real world, and therefore, their society would be affected to some degree by real-world issues, but this doesn't excuse the complete lack of world building. I recently learned that Gojo was separated from his parents and trained in Jujutsu since he was a child. Wanna know where I learned that from? From a Q&A. Not an actual chapter in the story, but from a Q&A. This is an important piece of information. Not only does it give us more insight into how talented kids are dehumanized in their culture, but it also further emphasizes Gojo's loneliness, and we had no clue about it until a Q&A. In Naruto, we saw how the average clan kid would live through the eyes of Sasuke. From a young age, his dad would take him out to the backyard and train with him, at one point even showing him the fireball jutsu, which Sasuke practiced until he had mastered it. Something as basic as this would be included in nearly any other manga. But JJK is JJK. So if you do want to know more about JJK's world, then you have to pray for another Q&A or a fan book so that Gege can finally answer your questions, because we're clearly not getting them in the story or any other kind of potential spin-off. That's just not how Gege does things. Now I need to address the massive disappointments that are the big three clans. Firstly, the Gojo clan. We knew that they waited a couple hundred years for their magical chosen ones to be born, and we don't really know that much else. We've seen sorcerers be useful with very little cursed energy. How is an entire major clan completely worthless beyond one person? And if they're not worthless, why aren't they more engaged with the action? How is it that we heard nothing from the clan once Gojo was sealed? These clans are supposedly the pillars of society, and yet nothing changed post-Zenin massacre? We know that JJ High gets their cursed weapons from the Zenin, and I'm sure that the family was highly influential in the economic sphere as well. Why is it so rarely mentioned that the entire clan got wiped out? What does the Kamo clan even do? Why were so few people from the major clans interested in the fact that the King of Curses was walking around? We've got Gojo and Noritoshi putting in work. These are the most powerful families in their world. Where are the rest of them? What happens when you skimp out on world building and proper setting exploration is that you really hurt your story, because world building can help the environment that the characters live in feel more alive, and that helps you better feel the stakes. As part of the narrative, Gege chose to write about situations in which society is near collapse. How they thought they could show society collapsing without showing society collapsing beyond the empty cities, I don't know. The closest we got was Utah leading and protecting a group of civilians in a stadium. We needed more of this. You need to show this kind of stuff because it boosts investment in your story and stakes. If you say things like, the merger is going to kill all of Japan, you can't just assume that we will care about those millions of unknown faceless people in your story. If we look at your narrative and see and feel that Japan is basically empty, then we won't care. World building adds important context. These things feel like they don't actually matter because Gege doesn't spend any time on them at all. We never saw the actual impact of the Shibuya incident or the Culling Games. There are a ton of curses and powerful sorcerers around creating chaos, and yet the public, who should still be around, feel non-existent. And so does the government. How's it holding up post-Shibuya? After the games? Over the time skip? and during the final showdown. It helped so much if we had an actual civilian perspective that granted us the much needed context. How is Japan's global image and economic power holding up if the government can't maintain control? JJK is set in the real world, but we don't know how the world reacts to any of this, and we should. I understand that Japan is the area of focus, but if you're going to use the real world as your setting, and use nation-destroying stakes, then you really should show off the greater world, even if only a little. But Gege just never gets to these ideas, and even the ideas that they do get to get thrown away far too quickly. The destruction of the Zenin clan, the execution of the higher-ups, the state of Japanese society, the Tengen barrier's impending destruction, any follow-up at all to Yuki and her beliefs, everyone knowing about curses, other countries plotting to kidnap sorcerers, etc, etc, etc. Some people will defend Gege's writing by saying that the clans or the higher-ups didn't really matter in the end, that they weren't actually that powerful or influential. The problem I have with this idea is that they were set up to be. We were told that they were important all throughout the beginning of the story. Why set up our expectations only to let it fall flat? It just makes all the conflicts with the higher-ups and the Zenin feel pointless. If Gojo could have just killed them all without any fallout, why not just do it at the beginning? I mean, sure, he took advantage of the fact that it was a chaotic time period, but the whole world is so badly handled that it honestly feels like nothing has changed. It all feels empty, like we never got enough, and that's not a feeling that you want your readers to have. I wish we learned more about the Heian era. I wish we learned more about sorcerers beyond Japan like Miguel in his hometown. I wish we got more. And I guess that's the overwhelming feeling that I'm left with at the end of JJK. Everything just feels artificially kept small. From Tengen's barrier effectively limiting everything supernaturally significant to Japan, to the fact that their entire society feels far too small and centralized. The world is way too small for the kind of story Gege is trying to tell. And yeah, I understand that the story was planned to have a short runtime, but it just feels so strange to limit yourself to a single place. This is a magical energy that draws its power from strong emotions. But only Japan has to deal with all the cursed spirits caused by global disasters like the World Wars, the Great Depression, the pandemic, and so on. JJK is a dish of food too big for the plate that it's on, leaving all of its readers only half full by dinner's end. But that's all for now. If you enjoyed the video, please like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps me out, and I'll see you guys next time.